You're listening to Graphic Novel Explorers Club podcast, an audio book club.
Last time on Graphic Novel Explorers Club.
Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch, where is he? Where the fuck is God?
Tulip! I fucking love ya!
Cassidy, how could you betray Jesse like that?
And that's a recap of Preacher Dixifried. And now we're getting into Preacher Volume 6, War in the Sun.
Right. Just to recap again, we are reading the original volumes as they were compiled, total of 9. They've since been recompiled into 6 volumes, so if you're reading along, you'll have to buy shorter volumes and figure it out.
Well, this one covers, I think we had a hard time finding this.
It covers the one-shot One Man's War.
Yeah, One Man's War.
Issues 34 to 40. So we're about 3 years into the run of Preacher if you were following along in real life.
That far along?
Yeah.
Damn.
Right? Well, I mean, it's 66 issues total, so we're not that far off from the home stretch.
And it feels like we've been recording this for 3 or 4 years.
It does. It does feel that way.
Well, let me ask, what do you guys feel about the series so far? If we're going to look at the midpoint right now, how do you feel about the book before we get into this?
Well, War in the Sun is my favorite collected volume of the series on art and the sort of the story hitting its peak as far as like conflict.
Gotcha.
What about you, Francis Preziosi?
For once in my life, I agree with Johnny. I think Volume 6 is by far my favorite. And so normally what happens is these volumes are pretty thick, and it takes me a while to read it. This one I read in one sitting, and like I couldn't flip through the pages fast enough. And after we got done reading it, I wanted Volume 7 again. I was like, okay, I need to see what happens next. So I think the story is finally coming together. All the little side stories that really didn't matter kind of falling away. We're getting into the meat and potatoes, and I can feel the conclusion and the climax coming. So I'm excited for that.
Well, we know who all the players are now, and like what their motivations are. So yeah, it kind of all comes to a head in this.
It's amazing though. It took 3 years for this to happen. I don't know if I was reading this on a monthly basis, if I could have stuck through every issue.
I mean, yeah, it's not a Real Housewives, but
okay, so we'll start off Volume 6 once again. Starts off with the one-shot One Man's War, which is the one-shot starring Starr and his origin story.
Starr.
Yeah, Starr.
This is how I think he sounds when he talks.
All stars, some people think.
I call him All Star.
So Smash Mouth, anyway, starts off in the 1970s, where we discover Starr's first mission, where he is, along with some other...
Well, not first mission, like he's
German Special Forces.
Yeah.
Right.
He's not working for the Grail yet.
Right, exactly. And the mission is pretty much a 90% success, with the exception of one little girl who ends up getting shot in the head.
Yeah, it was a terrorist had hijacked a plane and had demands, and then the German Special Forces went in and got everyone out except for that one little girl. Right,
and then this is, if you've been reading the series so far, Starr has come across as this really perverted and also super cold individual. And so this is the first time you think you see a glimmer of perhaps humanity, where he cradles the young girl and says, "This isn't the way the world should be," which you assume means that he has some sort of sympathies and he doesn't feel like children...
sympathy for innocence.
Right,
yeah.
And children shouldn't be hurt, typical human behavior. So you assume that's kind of his world perspective. So then it cuts to a couple years later, where he's been elevated to a trainer, and he's training future German Special Forces, and his partner decides to approach him regarding a secret organization, which we find out later to be the Grail.
And that's because he's been logging complaint after complaint about how things function within...
He's not satisfied with the way the world and the process of how things are going, and he believes in order, which is really the key to things. And he actually brings up the little girl again, once again still sounding sympathetic, I think. And so the individual introduces him to the organization, and eventually some heads of the organization, where they lay out their game plan of having the end of the world by launching fake nuclear missiles in the sky, having them be duds, calling it a miracle, and then bringing out their messiah, and then taking over. It also lays out how they've infiltrated governments and such. And so they task him with a mission, which he succeeds in. He ends up, I believe, blowing up. Was it a hospital?
Well, no, they want him to take out a reporter who sort of had gotten onto the trail
Fake news.
of the Grail.
Exactly.
And so, like, you have to kill this guy in a way so that it doesn't raise suspicion. So what he does is he blows up the entire hospital, and the Grail is impressed with his method of resolving the issue because, and it was an insane asylum too.
And I believe it hurt women and children as well. And so the impression you get initially of him being sympathetic starts falling away.
Yeah. What's interesting too, slightly off topic, but the Book of Mormon actually does talk about this theory right here. No, the actual religious text of Mormonism, that it's okay to sacrifice. It's better to sacrifice innocent lives to get rid of the bad than to let the bad fester, because the innocent will return to God. So that is actually, it is a thought in the Book of for Mormonism. I can't recall what the theory is with Catholicism, but there is, because a lot of people think, like, how can you let innocent people die? Well, that's part of the bigger plan, and the innocent will always return to God. So
the Vulcans have a similar
but please continue. I apologize.
No, that's great.
That the good of the many outweigh the good of the few, or the one.
Well, you touch upon something I've often wondered, Francis. I'm not well versed in theology, and I sometimes wonder if he does go beyond Catholicism. I mean, there's clear Catholic images he uses, the hierarchy of angels and such, but I do wonder if he's drawn from other texts. I mean,
Garth Ennis?
Yeah. Because, I mean, just slightly jumping ahead, I mean, Jesse is eventually going to go on a spirit walk. There's a whole Native American spirituality. I don't know if he delves into anything else regarding different religions, but that, this being sort of a representation of someone trying to find God. Sometimes they explore other religions.
You bring up a good point, is that none of the religions are deemed, there's no, at no point in this series is it implied that, the Catholics are right, or some other religion is correct. Like it seems to be that God's such an egomaniac that all religions feed into him. It doesn't matter what what his name is.
Right. God doesn't care.
Yeah.
He comes in different forms.
You left out a key thing in the of the reality of the Grail is when Herr Starr is introduced into the secret society. It's kind of hinted at, and then he's told, and then they basically tell him, like, okay, you do this, and then you're in, and he's talking to his the guy who introduced him to the Grail, and who I believe is a subordinate.
Yeah, you're right.
And the subordinate tells Herr Starr or All Star, the moment I talked to you about this, you were either in or you were dead.
Right.
Like that's how that's like the severity of being introduced to this secret society. Yeah.
Right. And so, like you said, Herr Starr is then accepted into the fold. Pretty soon he's introduced to basically the bloodline of Jesus, brother and sister
he thinks he's meeting the real deal.
Like, at this point, he's a believer. I wouldn't call him a religious man, but he definitely feels like, okay, this is a legitimate organization. He's going to meet, these holy people. And
if it brings about order, I'm in. Yeah.
And it turns out they're a bunch of inbred.
It's the last
weirdos.
Two descendants of Jesus Cristo.
Right. And then eventually down the road, he actually sees their child, which results from it, which is the Messiah that the All-Father hopes to prop up, who's also a horribly dysfunctioned human being. He's introduced, of course, to the All-Father, who's this obese, sloth, Pope-like character. And then...
this is the one who later flies...
in previous volumes.
Yeah, the previous volume, who falls out of the plane and crushes little baby Jesus' descendant.
Right. So through all that, he becomes more disenfranchised with the organization. Eventually, he decides that he's going to destroy the organization. I'm not sure if. I'll briefly explain his meeting with the Allfather. The Allfather somehow found out about Herr Starr's origins, which was he was a little kid, and then some boys tormented him and eventually carved the star in his face and plucked his eyeball out
with a broken piece of glass.
Right, and then
Johnny is such a stickler for detail. Sorry,
it's okay.
It is.
Yeah.
No, continue.
And technically, that was a Coke bottle. No.
Yeah, I know, right?
And it was the green one,
Yeah.
the clear one,
Yeah.
and it was 22 liters.
And they didn't just carve it with glass; they wrapped it carefully so they didn't cut
Yeah.
themselves. But he waited patiently and killed them one by one so that it wouldn't come back to them that he had
As a child, he killed them.
Yeah, exactly. I think the last one he killed was at 10. And so this impressed Allfather, and then they made him, forget the title now, this assassin, basically the official assassin of the Grail.
Yeah, what is the name of that assassin group?
Johnny's gonna fester on this.
Yep,
the whole
it's gonna come back.
episode, yeah.
Samson. Ha!
Oh, the Samsons. That's right.
Yeah, Samson unit. Don't act like you're not impressed, Francis.
I'm not.
All right. So, anyway, Herr Starr's extremely dissatisfied with the entire organization, how it's run. He feels it's corrupt. And then finally, in the 80s, they discover Genesis's dad, Phil Collins, had fallen from the sky with his invisible touch and revealed that God had taken off.
You know, I just realized this. It's interesting when we get together and talk because I catch other nuances I don't normally catch.
Mm-hmm.
So Herr Starr kind of is like other people that become disenfranchised with their church.
Right.
Like
Right.
you really buy into it, you start to believe it, and then you start thinking, wait, the church isn't doing what they should or what they said. And sometimes this results in cults. People create their own church, or sometimes people walk away. But I just got that connection. Like some people do, they become very much like, no, the church isn't doing it right. They become like fanatics.
Right.
And he's almost like a fanatic
Right.
now.
Right.
Oh, I'm so smart.
Damn. That's why we have you on here. We're just dumb. We just look
Johnny's
at
not impressed.
pretty pictures. I like the way it was colored.
I saw boobs in volume
Yeah.
2.
Anyway, so they discover that God has left and the devil's dead. And so it's become more important to basically Herr Starr that they take out the supposed Messiah, the All-Father, and replace them. And around that same time, Jesse becomes, in the 90s, becomes one with Genesis. They look into the whole thing, look into his background, and realize that he's the one that they're going to need to replace the Messiah with. So that ends basically the All-Father. Herr Starr's one shot.
Yeah. So I do want to say on this novel, I actually enjoyed the side story because at first I didn't realize this was a side part. It's not really related. But I wish we would have gotten this story much sooner because throughout the beginning of the series, I really didn't get Herr Starr's reasoning or involvement behind it or why he was so obsessed with Jesse. I thought it was such a convoluted, like there's so many people. Why? But I thought this was a great character development story. And unlike the last throwaway that was in the last volume, like all those side stories.
Oh, yeah, the TC and Jody story. That was stupid.
This was definitely a worthwhile one shot.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if I would have read it in the weeklies, but I'm really glad that I read it as part of the series. I think I have a newer appreciation now.
Although it does go into a little bit of, also to add some humor, some of the origin of Herr Starr's perversion, which, I mean, I don't know how do you guys feel about that edition? Would you have preferred this to be more of a serious comic, where everything with the exception of the weird rednecky rapey guys and Herr Starr's perversions? Because it really doesn't add anything. It adds humor. But it doesn't add anything to the story. I'm not sure.
So at this point, especially when the little girl being shot in the head, it doesn't faze me anymore. I've become numb. I've become numb to it because he was so over the top in the beginning, the author and the different artist, that it's almost like I just kind of gloss over it when I read it now. I'm like, okay, this is like the key gross part or the key like, oh, I'm trying to get you. Like, it almost is losing its impact now for me.
I agree. And then because we're reading it in this binge way, it's just white noise to me at this point.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I look at it a little different because anybody else that died in this story has pretty much had it coming.
True.
Most people, I would say that the vampire in New Orleans that killed the innocent woman that was just like fawning over him because she wanted to be a vampire. She's like one of her and the little girl are like two of the only people that are somewhat innocent. So it had some impact on me. I thought it was pretty traumatic looking when half her head's gone and it's the full page. It's not just like a little panel. So I thought it still had some impact for me.
All right. Well, now we're getting into the meat of the volume, basically issues 34 to 40, back to the main Preacher story. It cuts to, I think Jesse and gang are on their mission to go to Monument Valley to basically have Jesse smoke some peyote and go on a spirit walk, right, Johnny?
Yep.
And then didn't you like one of the panels? I think it was like the opening
when
panel.
they're driving along, all of a sudden Jesse's like, we got to pull over. Here's the spot, or he's just got a premonition. And then, it's several panels of them pulling over, and Cassidy's like, why are we stopping? And Jesse's like, I don't know. Or Tulip's like, I don't know. Jesse's want to stops here. And then when you turn the page, it's a landscape vista of the desert out there, almost like Moab, where there's little plateaus and Jesse. I don't know. Just I like the look on Jesse's face when he's like.
Well, it looks like he's returned home, right? I mean, part of me thinks because a lot of cowboy films were filmed there, that he sees some familiarity.
And he grew up loving those with his dad and
watching them on the film. So it's almost like going back to your hometown.
Yeah.
But actually being there.
But just like this little smirk on his face when he turns. Yeah, it's one of my favorite drawings in the entire series.
I just turned the page.
I appreciate it. I didn't appreciate his 90s haircut.
Yeah.
His Jerry curl, whatever.
His Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
2.
That is like Lethal Weapon 2, 3, straight up. Yeah. So anyway, at the same time, they're on their way to Monument Valley. It turns out that Cassidy is trying to go through detox. He's trying to get sober. He promises Tulip that he's not going to try anything. He's not going to try to mess with the love between her and Jesse, and she doesn't believe him with probably good reason.
And I think there's a thing in that scene. There's in this reveal where he's detoxing to try and be a good friend. I feel like both of them, not just Jesse. She comes around the corner of a grocery store, like a little 7-Eleven kind of quickie mart thing, and comes around the corner and sees him and is startled, and he goes, am I that scary? And I don't know, maybe as bad as Cassidy has been over the past several stories, I had a little empathy for him because he's like, he was human for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Francis, but I do agree that at this point, much like Starr in the beginning of his one shot, I started feeling like, well, maybe I misread Cassidy. Maybe he actually is a good guy, and I kind of forgot some of
if you remember,
revelations.
In the last episode we talked about, I was defending Cassidy. I said I still like him, and I don't think he's this bad guy.
Because you're a horrible judge of character.
No.
Well, I mean, you can only judge a person by what they show you, right? And so far, he's really trying. He's trying to detox. It's tough. I'm sure for a person who's been alive as long as he has to finally try to be sober. So anyway, it cuts to later on in the evening. Jesse hooks up with a Native American to get some peyote. And then they...
I thought you meant like hook up. I was like, I don't remember. Was that page torn out?
Oh, that was my fan fiction. Sorry. You had to pay the piper somehow.
Jesse and John Redcorn from King of the Hill.
Oh, yeah.
Crossover fan fiction.
God damn it. You've read all my stuff. Yeah, so anyway, he decides to go off on a drive along with Cassidy. I think Tulip decided to check out, and she didn't want to celebrate. And much to Cassidy's surprise, Jesse had brought some liquor, and he wasn't aware that Cassidy was trying to go.
Yeah. 2 giant bottles of Jack Daniels.
Yeah. And so Cassidy, well, I mean, what do you think? I didn't think he was being weak. He's in the current throes of detox. It's really hard for a guy who's going through that at that moment, and suddenly you flash some liquor. I don't think a guy can switch that quick.
I think you guys read way too much into this stuff, to some of this stuff. I wasn't thinking anything. I was just like, next page. Yeah.
See, I thought I didn't.
Maybe because I didn't take his detox seriously. That's probably been
Do you think his detox was just completely fake?
Yeah. Not fake, but it's like it's like any regular person. Like, this is me, right? This is me on Monday morning. Oh, I'm so fat. I need to like eat healthy, right? And then Wednesday night, I'm at happy hour with.
Or as soon as you get to work, there's a box of donuts.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have a.
So I never saw him as like a serious alcoholic who needed like AA to begin with. So I think for me, this part of the story just didn't resonate because it didn't fit for me.
I think him detoxing too. He's so drunk the entire series that you don't think it has a real impact on him physically. Even when he was first a vampire in the United States, he was drinking beer all the time with the other
That's a good point.
Irish, and so to see that, I think that's what made me empathize with him just a slight bit. Was like, oh shit, he's actually physically withdrawing from all the shit he does, and the thing with Cassidy is he promises things, but his actions contradict the words that come out of his mouth.
And women are used to this all the time, so I could see why Tulip is weary of him.
Well, having dealt with addicts before, I did see a lot of basically what I've seen before in him. Just, their hope that they're trying to be better, but then they ultimately disappoint you. Although, is it them or is it the disease? I don't know. It's a bigger.
You can't blame them for having alcoholism.
But you're a fucking vampire, so you can purge your blood of all that. So I don't know. Anyway, so him and Cassidy and Jesse start talking and having a conversation. And I think, Francis, you wanted to bring something up at that point. I think they were talking about the Saint of Killers.
Yeah, so Jesse and Cassidy are actually in the car. This is the kind of stuff I pay attention to. And they get on the subject
Oh, well,
of
now
the
we'll
Saint
all pay
Killers.
attention because it must be important.
Everyone shut up. Just shut up.
And Jesse says, I know the Saint of Killers is a butcher. I ain't denying that, but I told you what I found out, the things that I saw. Seems to me he had his chance, the same as any of us. He was free to choose right or wrong. And that's kind of a theme we hit on in another episode about religious freedom and Jesus and how he gave, by Jesus being the Son of God, he maintained free will. And I think it's interesting because I think that's true for a lot of people. And I know Johnny and I have talked about this, going back to the Saint of Killer stories, but not too much, like not going back. But God kind of set up like the storm and set up everything so that these events would happen for the Saint of Killers. But the Saint of Killers still had the choice. He could have been like, all this bad stuff happened. Yeah, my wife was murdered. My kid was murdered. I'm going to not go down this path. But he went down the path of anger and of revenge. And that resonated with me because I do feel like everyone has a choice. And you do see like some people, an addiction might be the right point. Like some people, they do get really hard into drugs or to alcohol or to fried chicken, like me. And some people get out of it and some people just can't. And I mean, addiction's not evil. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say that. But some people can choose, or some people grow up like in a really shitty environment and they rise above it, and some people don't. And I just think that concept is very interesting because I still think everyone has that within them to rise above whatever's happened.
Well, we'll skip ahead a little bit and actually continue with that point because later on Jesse does talk with the Saint of Killers and does reveal that because the Saint of Killers didn't know the exact motivation. He didn't know why God wanted this. And so Jesse gives him the answer that not that he wanted, but basically lays it out that God knew you were this type of person. He knew exactly what you would do if he steered you this way.
He knew which buttons to push to make you give up your humanity.
Right, and so basically he tempted the Saint of Killers much like Cassie was tempted with the bottle of Jack and dangled these easy targets for the Saint of Killers or bait for the Saint of Killers to grab. And so it does speak to I mean, why God would do this and how effed up in this story God is for basically wanting the Saint of Killers to lose his family and wanting the Saint of Killers to lose control so that he would become the Saint of Killers. It's predestination.
Part of a bigger plan.
Right, exactly. And so obviously this angers both Jesse and the Saint of Killers where they both are.
Let's not get too ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know God is trying to make me fat. I get that. But I am working with all the willpower that I have.
Someone has to be the All-Father.
Yep.
Yeah. Someone needs to keep all the donut shops and the pastry places
Exactly.
in
business.
All right. So in the meantime, Starr has regrouped. He's now the All-Father. He killed the All-Father in the previous volume, and he's starting to try to chase Jesse down. He still needs Jesse as the Messiah. So his plan is to use all the forces and abilities of the Grail, which includes manipulating and using the President of the United States to sign over an executive order of some sort, authorizing Starr and the what's the group name again, Johnny?
Samsons?
The Samsons.
Units. Oh,
Yeah.
I listened to you.
See,
Control of an army battalion that includes some tanks and such under
Yeah.
the control of a Colonel, I forgot, Colonel Holden, who actually I thought was pretty awesome throughout this volume. Colonel Holden is probably the only individual I saw through the comic that actually, well, maybe with the exception of the Saint of Killers.
And Jesse.
And Jesse made Starr kind of shit his pants.
Yeah.
Normally he's really cold, the hitman look, just stares dead ahead, Mr. Professional. But Colonel Holden, when he confronts him, looking at the orders, calling Starr as bullshit, like, I can't believe you're asking me to do this. You're not giving me the reasons why you need my forces.
And then Starr gets in his face a little bit, and then the Colonel gives it right back to him. It's like, I know you, motherfucker. Like, I know what you're doing. I can see right through your bullshit. And if anything happens to any of my soldiers, I'm going to kill you.
You can actually see Starr's dick actually go invert into him. So Starr gets a hold of this army battalion basically because he knows if he's going to get Jesse, which his ultimate plan is to kidnap Tulip and take her away somewhere far and hold her over Jesse's head so that he becomes the Messiah. But he knows if he's going to tussle with Jesse, he'll probably eventually have to tussle with the Saint of Killers.
He tussles? That's awesome. Tussle with me.
Yeah, but do you think he actually thinks that? I guess he doesn't know the limits of the Saint of Killers.
Yeah.
I just assumed he would know after throwing all his men at the Saint of Killers that he's pretty much impenetrable, but he assumes that the army would be able to do something.
Or tanks.
Or his mysterious plan B, which we'll go into.
So Jesse wakes up in the bathtub back at the hotel after they've been drinking all night and reveals to Tulip accidentally that Cassidy was drinking too.
Well, not even accidentally. I mean, it's just kind of matter of fact.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he doesn't realize he's given him up for having had alcohol again, which upsets Tulip.
And he's not understanding exactly why her face has a certain reaction. But yeah, obviously Tulip, using her female instincts, was correct in determining that Cassidy was lying about,
he's just weak.
He's weak.
He's weak.
And then, anyway, cut forward to later on, they decide to, I don't know why, drive into a certain piece of the desert to smoke the peyote.
Yeah, I think it wasn't he told there's a part like he was supposed to go to the desert or something.
Yeah, that's sort of part of the ritual of taking the peyotes. You go out there, you try not to throw up. You're still going to throw up, and then you trip and start to have visions.
Oh, yeah, that just to go back a bit, one of the funny parts was when he asked the guy who sold him the peyote, well, is that it? And then the guy said, well, I can have for $5, my dad can like say some ritual stuff, but it's
he's like, I didn't grow up.
Same.
Yeah, I didn't grow up the language, so I don't know what the hell he's saying.
So anyway, Starr basically finds Jesse and the gang, and as they're about to, as Jesse's about to smoke the peyote, suddenly the Saint of Killers pops up, and that's where it goes into the dialogue that we talked about, where Jesse and Tulip, surprisingly enough, Jesse didn't dissuade Tulip from standing by him with a gun, which I don't know what that would have done. But basically, they go up to talk to the Saint of Killers. The killer asks Jesse for the answer that he's been wanting.
And that's when all the tanks show up.
Right.
Turns out there's also a liaison between the president.
Right. He shows up in a jet.
Yeah, in a private jet.
This is when it gets really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the action is just nonstop. It's like a movie. It's really dynamic and so basically the tanks start shooting at the Saint of Killers. He's brushing off the shells. He's shooting into the tanks.
and like igniting their powder kegs and
blowing them
not
up.
that they have powder kegs, and it's not like a pirate ship.
I know.
But their shells. He's hit the
Right,
shells,
and they're trying to ram him. Nothing's working, basically. And at the same time, I think some Samson units are trying to run in and grab Jesse, and they end up gunning down Tulip, who actually she wasn't gunned down. Turns out she was okay. And then as they're about to grab Jesse, she hops on board a Humvee and fires an M60 and mows down the Samson units. And then at the same time, I think Cassie's trying to save the day again.
Cassidy's
it's broad daylight.
Yeah, so
it's like,
he tries to drive the truck that they're in, and
He's
again,
under his tarp.
Yeah, and then crashes the truck again.
because his hands like start flaming.
Right.
Like he starts. The sun's.
Well, he's got the
penetrating
blanket
him.
over his head so he can barely see.
Yeah.
To his credit, he is trying to help his friend, so he's not being a
Yes,
chicken shit
right.
about it. But
hits a rock, flies out of the window
again,
and then you're like, well, shit, it's the broad daylight. What just happened?
unlike
to
before.
Cassidy.
Right.
And later you find out he's pulled an ostrich move and has buried himself in the sand.
He's broken his bones again, but this time it's broad daylight, so he's catching himself on fire. So so Tulip ends up rescuing Jesse. They end up getting into the.
Well, Jesse gets knocked out when the Santa Killers. He touches the Santa Killers to say, "Hey, don't you want to get revenge?" And the Saint smashes him with his arm and flings him like a good 20 yards away. And so Jesse's kind of out of it through a lot of this action that's happening.
Right. So Herr Starr basically knows things aren't going well. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to capture Jesse, so he calls in his plan B, which is a B-1 bomber. You're not sure what that means exactly. You see a shot of the airplane, and that's about it.
And it's definitely a B-1 bomber.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Because Johnny did his research.
Or what is it, B-2? I don't know.
No, it's a B-1 and it's a bomber.
Yeah, it's not a fighter.
Yeah.
And it's a stealth.
Bomber.
Actually, I should say stealth bomber.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Because it's the one that's featured in
So then what happened?
Broken Arrow.
Yeah, Broken Arrow. Mm-hmm.
That was a good movie, by the way. Have you ever seen Broken Arrow?
No, I was just gonna ask what that was. We'll talk after.
Are you sure we can just go into a whole thing about Broken Arrow?
Oh, there's another crossover fiction that you can do.
Oh, yeah. John Travolta and Jesse start making out. Both with their hairs.
And Christopher, who was the kid in that? Christian Slater?
Christian Slater. That's
Oh,
right.
I like him.
Yeah, see?
Okay.
All right,
Christian
anyway.
Slater.
So Herr Starr calls in his plan B. They start trying to escape. Their plan is to escape into the airplane of the government official that had visited them. Unfortunately for them, Jesse and company come across the plane first. They commandeer it at gunpoint, and they take off. They don't know what's going on yet. They don't know about in terms of the bomber. They just know they need to get the F out of there. Herr Starr and Featherstone. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention the colonel comes back. He was in the Humvee that Tulip had used the gun on. He manages to come back and is about to blow away Herr Starr.
Shoots Herr Starr in the kneecap.
Yeah, shoots Herr Starr in the kneecap, and then Featherstone saves his butt and basically blows away the colonel. And then they decide to take off into, I think, some helicopters.
Yeah, I think the Samson unit helicopters are nearby, so they get those.
Right, and he knows what's going on.
He's like, we got to get the fuck out of here.
And he surprisingly chooses to split the two of them up so that in case one of the helicopters crashes, the other would survive, and hopefully Featherstone would continue the Grail's work. So,
not the Grail's work, Herr Starr's work.
Which is revenge. Revenge and hate, yes. So, in the end, the plane is taking off. They almost get hit by the B-1 bomber's missile, which they recognize as a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, the pilot's like, is that what I think it is?
Right.
And the other one's like, yeah, that's a nuclear bomb.
And so they start climbing because, as some of us may know, when a nuclear weapon goes off, there's also basically like an EMP, so it fries all the electronics.
Which I didn't know that was like a real thing. I didn't know EMPs actually.
Did you not know that, man? Did you not?
I thought they only existed in Star Wars. The ion cannon.
Oh, that's true. Right. So he's trying to climb desperately high up so that when the plane does get knocked out, they can use it as basically a glider.
Well, turn the power off before it detonates.
Right. Exactly.
Do you think this is way off topic? Do you think that's what's in the ion cannon? That giant bubble is nuclear explosions and
just
then
going off,
and then they're catching the EMP and then firing it.
Oh man! So there's no real aliens. Everyone is just getting so effed up and mutated from shooting ion cannons. That's why they get the long necks and all that stuff.
So what's happening now?
Oh, sorry. Well, anyway, so Luke is. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Some Star Wars theories.
So the airplane is climbing and climbing. They didn't realize that the back was still open. Jesse ends up tumbling out.
Well, the bomb detonates, and the explosion knocks the airplane around, and then Jesse gets knocked out the access door.
Fortunately, Cassidy grabs his arm, but it's still daylight, so his arm's on fire. And then he's trying to pull Jesse in, but then eventually Jesse basically knows there's no hope. If he doesn't let go, it's going to drag both of them. So he uses the word of God to make Cassidy let him go, and then he falls to his apparent death.
But before that, he says, "Tell Tulip I love her."
Oh, very good point.
That's going to come
very important.
And one of the pilots says, "Oh my God, we just lost somebody out the door, I think." And Tulip goes back there and sees Cassidy, and she freaks out.
And he really tried. I mean, it wasn't like, see you later, buddy.
No, he really didn't. Like, his whole arm is, like, on fire. And Jesse keeps saying, let go. And he won't. And so he uses the word of God, like you said.
And then Featherstone's helicopter apparently was safe because they flew low per Air Star's instructions. But Air Star's helicopter apparently off-screen or off-panel crashed. So his fate is unknown. And, of course, the Saint of Killers is still alive, unhurt and untouched by the nuclear explosion. So that ends that issue.
And then cuts to a month later. Air Starr is in a, I guess an old mine.
Yeah.
These.
Here we go again.
These two yokels and their, I guess, completely mentally retarded third brother.
Right.
Are like, hey, we saved your life. Unfortunately, we had to lop off your leg.
Right.
And they're not too compassionate about the reveal. They just whip his blanket off, and they're like, "You're missing your leg, dude."
Actually, I kind of feel like they delighted in the fact that they could see his face when they did that. And so you're assuming once again that he's going to get raped again. Which
he finds a magazine.
Right.
It's cheese sodomy. It's
I don't even know where Garth Ennis came up with this.
Or Steve Dillon, like who?
Right.
What was the prompt for? Cheese sodomy is the cheese.
There's probably a porn out there.
Oh, I was just thinking because it was Swiss cheese, so it has holes.
Yeah, I guess it's.
You got way too excited about that.
I was like, I had a Francis moment where I found something smart.
Oh, you did.
Sodomy.
That's right.
Well,
that's right.
All these years, he's been boring his own holes in the cheese.
Yeah, I know.
No, it is actually smart.
That
is, So there's probably a thing out there.
So the two more mentally aware, capable brothers are like, what, you think we're hillbillies and we're just gonna been watching too many banjo movies about woods and redneck stuff, we're not gonna rape you, man, like you're ridiculous.
You sound like the last guy. Wait, what?
Air Star's like, what do you mean the last guy? He's like, oh, the other guy from your helicopter, we ate him.
Right, exactly.
So it's revealed that these guys are cannibals,
right?
And they ate Air Star's lower leg
because the other guys were too crispy fried.
Yeah, and they're preparing to eat his other leg, and they talk about how they're going to do it. They're going to stuff it with garlic and olive oil.
Oh, well, they have
butter.
a whole cookbook. Yeah, they're like Guy Fieri. It's like bam. Well, that's not Guy. That's
that's Guy Fieri. Oh no, you're thinking of the Louisiana guy.
Exactly.
Emerald Lagasse.
Yeah, thank you.
I love you, Emerald.
By the way, this is sponsored by. But so anyways, Air Starr is forced to the mentally disabled brother approaches Air Starr and with a gun.
He found a pistol from
the
helicopter
crash
site.
Right? But then turns around and asks in some sort of
he physically implies he sticks his ass in Air Star's face and says "wub wub,"
right? Which means wipe apparently. And Air Starr realizes in order to get the pistol he has to, so he ends up wiping the guy's butt, grabbing his gun, and then killing him.
Yeah.
The other brothers storm in. He proceeds to kill them with the pistol.
And they all fall on top of him.
Right. But somehow, eventually, he manages to escape the cave. I don't know how. He manages to run across the desert. I don't know how on one leg. Yeah. I mean, isn't there supposed to be some sort of nuclear fallout? Because it's implied like
don't they show him like on the one leg like falling?
Yeah,
he's trying to run. I think he must have crawled.
He'll make like 5 or 6 steps, fall, and then get up and hop again.
Somehow he manages to contact the Grail and Featherstone, and she rescues him. And
this is the part of the comic book that you're like, I don't believe that.
Right, basically. Well, the thing is they talk about basically the news and media blame and the government blame the nuclear explosion on a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And like all sorts of people are irradiated and killed. I can't believe that Starr was close enough to that when he got out of the cave, that everything's fine for his one-legged self to basically run across.
Well, they were saying the wind was blowing it up into the desert, so maybe he was south enough of it.
But still, on one leg, I mean, with no resources. Yeah. But regardless, he manages to survive and decides that it's still his mission to basically get revenge on Jesse. Then it cuts to Jesse.
It cuts to Cassidy and Tulip too.
Well, it cuts a lot, but I think we're just focused on each side story right now.
Well, we'll cut to Cassidy and Tulip anyways, because Jesse will end up intersecting with that. So Cassidy and Tulip, 1 month later, so that was right after the explosion, but 1 month later, they're robbing a pharmacy. Tulip does not look good. She looks drugged out of her mind. Cassidy just looks pretty solemn. It turns out that basically Tulip is still in denial, thinks that maybe Jesse will come back. But
no, I don't think she's in denial about that.
She's just in mourning.
She's a complete wreck and doesn't know how to deal with her grief.
Right, and so she's self-medicating with booze and drugs. At this point, I still have hope for Cassidy. I think he's just trying to help a friend get through grief from the first couple panels. He doesn't know what to do.
And she keeps telling him. She keeps saying, like, it just hurts so bad. It just hurts so bad. And just make it go away. Make it go away.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't seem like he's doing anything bad. Like, she's sort of, I guess, implying that maybe she wants him to have sex, kind of like, I don't know, a morning sex kind of.
Not in the morning.
Right, not in the morning, but morning.
Yeah.
And
sex.
she's taking all these pills, all these drugs, so she's very drugged out.
But he's trying to maintain control and try to be a good friend, and it's like, no, sorry, and he just basically tucks her in the bed. And
then eventually he caves.
Right, he does cave,
and they start sleeping.
She says, like, help me,
yeah.
And eventually he's
and that's
like,
what, like,
and he says, like, how much can one man take?
Right.
He's like, I tried, and
right, and up to that point, I still had faith in Cassidy because
to respect Jesse's
right, because I felt like he was still trying to give his distance, and I can understand that. You both assume your friend's dead. She's really trying to come on to you. Maybe you think that having like sad fuck is gonna like help her heal. I don't know. And so at that point, I think it's okay. But then things start changing. Where doesn't she reach out to?
She calls her friend.
Yeah,
right. That gal from the previous volume.
Yeah.
And I forgot why she was calling.
Just because she's like, I need help. Can I please come home to you?
Right. I think she has an epiphany where this is not the life she wants. Right. She doesn't want to be drugging.
Well, she has just a moment of clarity to say, I need help. And as she's on the phone with her friend, Cassidy hangs the phone up on her.
That's when things start getting dark.
And that's when I start thinking, I think Cassidy's just giving her the pills now. I don't think she's even he's supplying her with the medication.
So now, the perspective totally changes where now he's
manipulating.
Right. He's not clueless and just trying to do the best he can. He actively is now trying to maintain her mind in this kind of haze and soft state so he can control her, which now dialogue from previous volumes where people said don't trust him.
Yeah.
And he has a habit of this, right? He's an actual social vampire where this isn't the first gal he's tried to steal away from a friend, and it's
or he just preys on the people around him.
Right.
Yeah. And what's interesting is technically Jesse is dead, so why he's even keeping her like this, I was kind of confused. Like, why are you so manipulative and drugging her when there's no competition for you anymore?
But then it makes me wonder.
What do you mean by that?
Well, basically, it's not as if Jesse's going to show up and suddenly he has
dead.
to fight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
he has all the cards now.
But he doesn't because Tulip knows what a piece of shit he is.
Oh, and Tulip asks him. She says, did Jesse say anything before he died? And he said, nope.
Right.
Yeah,
he
just
doesn't
fell.
confine. Yeah.
Yeah, he just fell.
In one way, if you're still looking at Cassidy being sympathetic, you could think, well, he's trying to not make it more painful, right? I've seen that before, where someone asks, did their loved one say anything before they passed away, and maybe they don't want to reignite certain feelings in the person.
Yeah.
A normal human being, maybe they would do it in a sympathetic way. He does it in an extremely manipulative way, where basically he even actively says this, where he wants her to push Jesse to the corners of her mind where
he's been dead a month and he's like, just forget about it. It's
right.
Exactly. Just move on, stand and move on.
So you do really wonder about the previous relationships he's had, where how healthy are they? I mean,
and there's another scene too where after they've had sex, it's the next morning, and Cassidy like gets in bed with her, and she's Tulip says to him, "Can you put your sunglasses back on?"
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so we still don't know what's going on with his eyes, right?
Yep. So something else that I started noticing right around this time is, I don't know, and again, I don't know if I'm just putting my own opinion on it, but I'm starting to see the 7 deadly sins really come through. So, so Jesse is representative to me of envy and lust, right? He wants what Jesse has. He wants Tulip at all cost, and he's drugging her to get that. Jesse himself has a lot of pride, and like he doesn't allow Tulip to help him a lot because he thinks he can do it on his own. The All-Star, no, Air-Star, the
Smash
father.
Mouth.
What's the fat guy?
All-Father.
All-Father. He's representative of gluttony, right? And just he makes himself vomit so he can eat more. And then greed, I think that goes back to almost everybody right now, right? Like Jesse wants to find God at all cost. Her, I don't know these names.
Well, you know what?
Starr.
Herr is an actual name. That's like Mr. and
Yeah,
Joe,
it's
right?
like Sir.
So we don't actually know his name.
Starr.
So Starr, he has anger also, but I just started
Anger's
noticing.
the sin.
Yeah.
When he's
I
got
didn't
lust
know.
too.
Yeah.
What
Because
about
it spurns
sleepiness?
love. So.
Stop.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, sorry, that's Herr Starr. Sorry, Herr Starr.
Yeah. So, but I started noticing the 7 deadly sins are really, like, I think, portrayed through the characters.
I'm sorry. I had asked, is sleepiness? Is that a sin?
it's part of slothness, right?
Oh.
If you're not being productive, if you're just, like, and I struggle with this, right? On Sundays when you Netflix binge all day, like, there's more you could be doing with your life. Like, you could be volunteering. You
I
could
thought
be
you were
back to
supposed
the
to
community.
be resting on Sundays.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but still, I mean, you could be interacting with your family and not
That
on
sounds like
Netflix.
work.
Yeah, that sounds like work.
But that's a really good point, Francis. I never thought about that. See, that's why Francis is amazing on this book.
Thanks.
That's why you're Catholic.
That's
is
why-
to
that
help
is why I'm
us
Catholic.
bring up points about preacher.
Once we're done with this book, you're off the show. But that's
Yeah.
So briefly going over what happened to Jesse during the same previous month, right after the explosion. Turns out he's fine, surprisingly enough.
Well, not fine.
Okay, so his eye's gone, which interestingly
eye.
enough, left eye, Starr is missing his right eye. I don't know if that means anything,
Oh.
but they're missing opposite eyes. And then, but
And he's wandering in the desert.
right, he gets found by a weirdo, but not the same kind of weirdo as Starr. The guy's just basically a washout from, I think, the Air Force. He wanted to be an astronaut, faked his way in. They kicked him out.
I think it's rock and roll from G.I. Joe.
He does look like him, doesn't he?
That's his M60 on the
Oh my God,
on the Humvee.
man, the Joes really fell apart after a while. Francis doesn't
I'm
get it.
smiling.
Yeah.
You can't hear my smile.
well, next time we'll make a She-Ra reference.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then so this guy basically nurses Jesse to health, tells him his story, which is somewhat interesting, explains why he wrote a big "fuck you" in the desert.
So Jesse's walking up, and an explosion goes off
Before he meets the guy.
Yeah,
right?
flings him backwards, and when he kind of sits up, he sees this giant, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of yards big, saying "fuck you."
Right.
in the
And
desert.
basically it was the guy's way of sending a message to the astronauts who actually made it. At least they'll see this. And it kind of gives them some purpose in life. He had basically gone through life being drugged up, having sex with prostitutes, but finally he found focus.
Well, he had tried to he joined the Air Force, tried to get into astronaut NASA program.
Space camp.
Yeah, lied about who he was. Because he worked in the
Administrative office.
yeah, and switched his application with somebody else that was actually qualified.
Right, exactly.
And I love he's like, I lasted about a day and they found out. Like, I just love it.
Well, he was really, when they finally showed the picture, it was like he's super scrawny and everyone else is pretty well
Right,
fit.
Yeah.
It's like, no one's going to believe you, dude.
Yeah.
So in the end, he nurses Jesse to health. I guess it takes about a month. And then he gives Jesse, I think, like $1,000 and a Jeep.
And a dog.
No, because Jesse finds the dog later on.
Oh,
He's
dang
getting
it.
gas.
Yeah, I
yeah,
just read that.
and he buys like some books from the guy and gets the dog too.
Stephen King books, too.
Yeah. Stand, which
Yeah.
is about
And dog
post-apocalyptic.
is God backwards.
Oh, whoa! deep.
Yeah.
Oh my
And-
God, is that God?
And cat backwards is tech. Rotor backwards is rotor.
So I forget. Does Jesse
I'm like thinking now.
does Jesse contact that friend of Tulip's?
He does call. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Johnny, he calls her and she's like, yeah, I heard from her. I think she's in Arizona.
No, he used a cell phone. No.
Yeah. It's like, but I think she's in Arizona. He gets all excited and he heads that way.
And the worst part of that is she's about to tell him, like, she's in bad shape.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know everything, though.
Yeah.
Because Tulip wasn't able to get everything, but it sounded like she was in really bad shape.
And Jesse's like, I'll find her. I'll go to all our old places that we used to go to when we were out here, and hangs up before.
Right. So that's his strategy, and he eventually does find them. They're having a lovely dinner. They're about to leave, and basically Cassidy tells Tulip to kiss him. She seems resistant, but he nevertheless perseveres.
And Jesse's observing this through a window.
Right. And, well, he's glad at first. He sees his friends. He says, it's awesome. Yeah. We're together. And then he sees them kiss, and he basically falls flat on his back, stunned from the image of, which is kind of corny. That's a real rom-com kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
But
those are popular in the 90s.
Oh, that's true. I got to remember when it was written.
Or like a Laurel and Hardy kind of.
Or like Archie.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, yeah, falling on your back like that, one, you would injure yourself terribly. You're already hurt. I wouldn't do that. But so he ends up falling flat on his back and says something like, damn.
Well, there's a side story. They didn't put it in this, where he goes to the doctor's office and gets a CAT scan and everything's fine.
Right. So
I almost believed you for like a split second. I was like, what?
And then basically that leaves it where they're leaving. Tulip still doesn't look very happy, right?
No, she looks miserable.
And basically Jesse's left wondering what's going on. You know, I've only been gone a month.
Yeah.
And so that ends the story technically. There's also...
and then at this point I'm like, I need to read more. Where's book 7?
Right.
And Johnny has it, so I need to borrow it from him.
So
I'm going to dole it out one page at a time.
Yeah.
Going back to my point of whether or not the humor is needed, laced throughout the book and also at the end is side stories of Arseface and his rise to success in the music world. He's basically released like #1 records. I think he's tried to be part of a charity concert after the nuclear explosion. And at the end, the very end of the comic, there's a bizarre, I think, dream.
Well, he's like sad. And like, it's the first time you get an insight into like how he actually feels about his face.
Right.
And he's like, I'm ugly. No one's going to love me. Mm-hmm. And this fairy godmother shows up with a butt face.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I love that Johnny pointed to his own face when he just said that.
Well, he has a very butt-like face.
It's very round and split down the middle, and I fart out of it.
Yeah.
And like she transports him to a
butt world.
A butt world where everybody's a butt, and they seem to fawn over him and they love him. They're like, Arseface, you're so great. Arseface, you're so great. We love you.
Right.
And then he starts to fly, and then he is up in space and he meets his dad, and his dad apologizes and
I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, this voice from out of the panels, like, do you understand now? And he goes, yeah, I do. And he starts to cry, and you're like, what the fuck was that all about?
So obviously God has revealed part of his plan to Arseface.
See, that's what I'm wondering.
That's what I think.
Because the world starts speaking to Arseface, and I'm wondering if it is God, which is like, oh man. And I don't know. At this point, Arseface has totally forgiven Jesse, but I wonder, is God going to try to turn Arseface on Jesse again?
So you think he spoke to him through a dream?
Yeah, why not? He's God.
Yeah, why not?
Anyway, I thought it was kind of
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
God speaks to us a lot of ways.
Not me.
I don't know how I feel about Arseface. Arseface is both humorous and at the same time takes away from the story. But
well, I don't think the story would work if it was completely serious, or if it was completely wacky.
Stephen King, The Dark Tower kind of.
But like Jesse and Cassidy too, they all have a good sense of humor, so it adds.
Right.
Like it's not out of place for them to laugh at things, and then it kind of gives you, the reader, the approval to laugh at like Arseface.
That's true.
I actually like the Arseface story because, as I said a few episodes back, I'm surprised he hasn't tried to kill himself again, and so there's a reason why he's still here on Earth. We don't know what that reason is, but I'm always. So I kind of liked it. I actually and I find myself, at first I thought the story was really stupid and he's so gross to look at. But as we're going through, I'm getting more and more invested in Arseface.
In him, yeah.
I guess I feel the same way. It's hard for me to believe his rise to fame. Like, he has a #1 single because he sings basically like Nirvana, I assume, in garbled.
Didn't you say something we were talking on before we started recording, or maybe it was Johnny, something about how you guys thought it was part of like 90s rock in general? Like, you don't really understand what the singers were saying,
right? Exactly.
But you just started following them.
And like, and from American Idol, that the guy who was singing "She Bangs,"
right?
Like that. I'm sure he's famous because of his face.
I wouldn't say that though.
It's the spectacle.
I would argue against that point only because when they do talk to people who are his fans, there isn't any kind of irony. Like, you could tell with, God, what is his name now? But I felt like there was a legitimate love and feeling like he was saying something poetic. And basically, because they couldn't understand what he was saying, they were putting on their own interpretations.
Oh, okay. Good point.
Of the lyrics.
Completely wrong, but good point.
Yeah, well, I think you're completely wrong.
Can I say something really off topic?
No, B1 bomber. What?
I am so proud of Johnny. He did not say GD once this whole episode.
Oh, God.
Don't.
Darn it.
Yeah.
Why is that? See, that's
I'm so proud of you.
This is so off topic. I wouldn't even said it if you hadn't brought it up. Now I'm going to say it. God damn it.
Because you never said it. You never said
Now
it
the recording's
in the
gonna
first season. But when we got into this book, all of a sudden you started saying it a lot. And I
say it all the time.
Well, no.
I kind of think he does.
Yeah.
Maybe, but you're slightly respectful unknowingly when I'm around. I don't know.
No.
But.
Not really.
Because, see, I don't, until you start pointing it out, I never thought it was a bad word.
Oh, but now you're thinking it.
I will still say it.
It's funny. It's funny you actually say that because I got in trouble in 6th grade for saying "damn it," not "God damn it," but "damn it."
Yeah, that's a bad word.
And the teacher said you can't say that, and I said, but Dr. McCoy on Star Trek says "damn it" all the time. How can it be a bad word?
I have a similar story when we went to Disneyland as children, and I was probably 12 or 13, maybe even a little older than that. And we went to Disneyland, and my uncle was going to pay for us all to get our names embroidered on.
Well, that's expensive.
Mickey Mouse ears.
Yeah.
And so I told the lady behind the counter, I want mine to say fart. And she said, we don't put curse words on hats. And I said, well, if it was a curse word, I wouldn't have said it to you. She said, we're still not going to put it on there. And then I said, God damn it.
And she put that on there.
Yeah. Well, I guess that concludes the volume. Did we introduce ourselves?
No.
We're 3 friends who got together to do this podcast. I'm Francis, one of the co-hosts.
I'm Dennis, another co-host.
And I'm Jesse Custer. No, I'm Johnny Flores, another co-host.
And the ringleader, unfortunately.
Really is.
You ringleadered this one. Is that a rang it?
No, Dennis did. Good job,
I know.
Dennis.
You guys, okay, thank you very much.
This one was a much better run, so now you're the ringleader.
Yeah, it's really hard to. There's so much to cover
I know.
in one. So thank you, listeners, for listening
And bearing through it.
Yeah. If you want, you can follow me, Francis, on Instagram at Wards in Waffles.
You can follow the Gene Explorers Club Instagram at Gene Explorers Club or on Twitter at Gene Explorers Club. If you want to email us any comments, recommendations for season 2, you can email us genexplorersclub@gmail.com.
And this is Johnny, and you can follow me on Twitter at Serious Talk Twit and my other show at stspodcast.com.
And then let's see, we're at volume 6.
So it'll be 7 next week.
And then 8 and 9.
That's usually how numbers work.
I don't know.
You know, we should have started with 9 and gone backwards.
Oh, that would have been better.
That would have
Like that episode of Seinfeld.
Right, which was based on a play. Right.
Yeah,
that would be a good one.
Yeah, boss. Yeah, boss. All right. Well, thanks for listening, listeners. And we will be back. That's a better way of saying it. Next week.
Bye.
Bye.